Well, it looks like it's 7 o'clock. Shall we start?
Let's go.
All right, well, let's go. Welcome to the virtual show table featuring Courtney. Thanks to everybody for sending in the great pictures and for Janice for putting the slideshow together. And welcome Mandy and Kurt to the St. Augustine Orchid Society. So tonight we've got Courtney Hackney, who's going to wow us with his review of the orchids tonight.
Well, as usual, Dennis did a great job putting all of the photos that our members sent in into something that flows well and just really helps me or allows me to describe an awful lot of aspects of the orchid world. So, first one is a good place to start. Phalaenopsis longpri yolanda. We have no idea what it is. It's
Exactly.
not registered, and I say this whenever we get one of these. This is becoming a common thing for commercial operations who don't want to spend $15 to register their hybrid. I'm looking at this plant, and I can see that unique characteristics about it. The color is sort of what a lot of pink Phalaenopsis used to be before we had really dark pinks. But that's just the reality, I guess, and they're beautiful. We just don't know what they are and can't really help anybody understand how to grow them if there's a problem with them. Let's go to the next one. We can say a lot more about this one because we know its name. It's registered. Phalaenopsis British bullseye. This is yours. It's a beautiful example of a semi-alba Phalaenopsis. And I'm sure that many people look at this and have no idea that the key species in the background of this is Phalaenopsis equestris. Hold on a second. I just lost something. There we go. Phalaenopsis equestris is this little thing, we'll talk about it again in a minute, um, that has a colored lip. It's very small, doesn't have great shape, but hybridizers have succeeded after many generations of getting the characteristics they wanted from Phalaenopsis equestris into a large flower. And you can see nice round form. Notice how the flowers just about touch each other on that shingled inflorescence. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, I don't know, 14, 15, something like that. Flowers on a stem. I love the semi-albas, and that's a really beautiful one, Sue.
Yeah, it is.
Next, I used to get accused when I did the show table of finding equestris in every Phalaenopsis. And the fact is, it isn't hard. I mean, this is um, Dortonopsis, which is Phalaenopsis now, Chia E. Yenlin. And you can see in this case, the Phalaenopsis is closer to the current cross, not in the distant past. And you can see the shape coming out of the Equestris, that more of a star shape. And one of the things that actually was an issue with getting the semi-albas into a large form in the shingled form is that Equestris isn't a shingled, doesn't produce a shingled sort of inflorescence. It's almost a whorl, and they produce a lot of branches, which is great when you want to produce Phalaenopsis that's got a mass of flowers like this one. It's a different approach to breeding Phalaenopsis, and this is a really nice one. I really like this. Next. And here we have a number of, I don't want to call these new approaches to breeding Phalaenopsis because at least two of them fit that category. Um, the Blue Ridge Quartet, that really is a cool thing. Not everyone would appreciate it if you're used to big, giant flowers on Phalaenopsis, but those of us that have been around the Phalaenopsis species for a long time appreciate all the characteristics that are hiding there in those species. And we have some hybridizers spending some time bringing out those characteristics. And the one that I found interesting here is this is Blue Ridge Quartet. This has got Bellina, Ambonensis, Ludimania, and Sumatrana all in the background. Look at the number of buds that are coming. These can be and probably will be fairly floriferous as they mature. So there are ways of getting these unusual forms, and I can see the Sumatrana form in this one into Phalaenopsis that are more complex. And this is not a primary hybrid. This is multiple generations. It's really cool. On the right, upper right, is Phal Patty Lee Lime. This is got a species that I really love in it. It's one we don't see very often, and it's kind of unfortunate. The Micheletziae. This is a yellowish colored thing with this particular sort of form of flower. It's it's a beautiful species, and in this case, they have done a good job of embedding it in a complex hybrid. There's other species in there, of course, but the one species, the Micheletziae, is dominant in the shape and in the color. Bottom left, surprising peacock. That's a golden piocher lineage. Golden piocher is that one that came along, I guess it's been probably 30 years ago now in Taiwan, that had a genetic mistake that did not put the color in the same pattern on every flower. And it's been bred into just about everything. And what was fascinating about the ancestry of this one is there are 15 species of Phalaenopsis in the ancestry of this particular hybrid, which is pretty interesting. Phalaenopsis tetraspis. We've seen this coming along and starting to be integrated into more complex, more modern hybrids. And what's fascinating is this has a really huge distribution. Um, it's found in a number of islands in the Indo-Pacific, but all over the Indian Ocean archipelago too. So it's I won't say a common species, it's widespread, maybe is the way to say that. Next. Vanda Dr. Anek Jed Sarm. If you look at this would sort of strike you as a classic strap leaf Vanda, and it is. All the pattern that you see there has been around for a long time. It's been manipulated in different color forms, varying variations of flower size by hybridizers. And if you know some of the background species and hybrids, you would recognize the plant that we call Gordon Dillon. It was sort of one of the great big ones that came along. And as I said, it's in the background of just about everything and all sorts of colors. And nicely grown. You can see how big the flowers are. Kathleen Snyder is doing a good job of growing that. I guess that's probably outside on a lanai. They take typically more sun than many of the other Vandas. So she's definitely doing that. On the right, Vanda Moats Sparkle is a great example of what Vanda is really about. Other than the one species that makes the big round Sandarana form, the Vanda Sandarana, which probably isn't a true Vanda. But other than that, most of the other Vandas are more like the flowers you see on the right. They're typically smaller, more spaced. They don't have that beautiful round form. And I guess we're really very lucky that the Vanda Sandarana will make viable hybrids with just about any of the Vanda members, which gives us all sorts of beautiful things to spend our money on. Okay, next. And of course, we talk about every month the ascocentrums, which are no longer ascocentrums, but are now considered Vandas. But they do represent, if you assume they're in the Vandas, which we are, they do represent a different lineage in terms of the development of this group of species. And that is smaller plants, smaller flowers, and more color, which is pretty cool because it allows us to have all these neat things that fit nicely into our collections. The Ascocenda Stephanie Wills, and again, technically that's a Vanda, but telling us that it's Ascocenda tells us something important about the ancestry. Ascocentrum garryi on the right. We had a discussion at our last meeting about garryi and miniatum because they have often been considered the same, But our speaker pointed out that they have a different lip shape, which I had never heard before. But I know that I look at them and I can tell there's something different about them, even though the color, flower size, and everything is about the same. But notice on this one, notice the color on the leaves, the little speckles. That's not a fungus. Um, that is simply a response of the plant to getting the right amount of light. It's getting right at the maximum amount, and you can see it's delivering a really good head of flowers on both of those inflorescences. Eric's doing a great job of growing that thing. Next, Trichoglossum. I think that's what that TRGL
Yeah.
is. Rosea variety Reverissima. Look at the number of flowers on it. The vast world of orchids is more like this than the standard Cattleyas and Phalaenopsis and Vandas that we typically have in our collections. They have lots of flowers, typically small, white or green, but this is a beautifully grown plant, and they can deliver some pretty good numbers of flowers when you get them grown well. I've tried to count the number of flowers on this, but I suspect there's some in the back. But Ellen Fay is growing that one very, very, very well. The Sarcoglottis Fitzhart. This is a primary between two species. I've often thought that this particular group of orchids was going to develop a little faster in terms of hybrids, and I'm not sure exactly why it hasn't. Maybe there just hasn't been enough of interest from the people who buy them. That's usually what does the trick. If there's something that sells really well, there are hybridizers that will work on making that even better. But beautifully grown. That's Sheila Nathanson's.
She's
Next.
growing that in the wintertime in a garage in Pittsburgh because apparently it likes to get really cold. I haven't had any luck with growing that.
No, neither have I. But I haven't really spent the time to try and give them what they want. They're gonna need a special kind of condition, and that's not unusual for an awful lot of orchids, even ones from the tropics, often require cool temperatures because their natural habitat is at elevation.
Yeah.
So you have to, if you're growing or you're interested in growing something like this, you need to investigate. In this case, you would investigate the two species in the background to see where they grow and get some idea of what the possibility is of growing them in your greenhouse or your growing space. Okay, next. Chilocista parisiae, one of those leafless orchids that has fascinated everyone. I'm seeing this pretty much almost every month we have at least one. It's surprising how many species there are that are leafless, and they're all over the world. It isn't just one genus or one group. It's a very common theme in the orchid world. If you don't really need a lot of photosynthesis. Some of the leafless are only leafless for part of the time, just like a lot of trees, while others are leafless all the time. But they don't need to make catch a lot of energy. And if you've seen some of these well grown, you know that those roots coming out can be as thick as leaves and maybe even more efficient because they're round. So they can get light coming from many directions in terms of capturing sunlight for energy. On the right is a hybrid. This is the Vanda group. This is Renanthera Bill Crocker. This is my clone. And one of the parents is Imshudiana, which is a beautiful, beautiful Renanthera. I haven't seen as many Renanthers around as there used to be, and most of the ones that I see now tend to be in the miniature range. And the reason is, um, I had this, I guess, last year in the virtual show table. It had two inflorescences, but the plant itself was 10 feet tall, and I was having a hard time managing it. So I whacked the bottom off, and it did not like it. So it's finally putting out some roots, but in response, it only did one inflorescence. But you got to get these things under control sometimes. Next, isn't this just cute? That's all you can say about it. This is beautiful. This is a mini miniature. I don't know what else you could say about it. Um, a mini miniature. It's from Ecuador, and you'll find that there are an awful lot of tiny, tiny orchids, um, not dissimilar in size from this. Many don't have flowers that are as pretty as this, and many of them don't have the leaves that are nice as this. But these can make wonderful collections, particularly for people who don't have space, don't have greenhouse or a yard. You can have a basically a terrarium with LED lights. We used to call these Wardian cases, and that's still the best name. But I see them being grown in all sorts of fish tanks and so forth. You have to master humidity and air movement. But once you do that, um, you can grow these fairly well. And you can grow some of these cool growing species because, for the most part, humans don't like the temperatures that we have in our greenhouse either. We wouldn't want it to be 90 degrees in our house. Well, most of us don't every day. But these need to be understood, and you need to design your growing conditions to fit whatever you're going to put in there. But you can get a lot of these little orchids in a Wardian case, that's for sure. You'll sometimes see Wardian cases at shows that give you a good example of what that looks like. But look how tiny that is in that photo to the left. Beautiful. Next, Neomuria irrata. Every time I see this species in bloom, I just think we should do more as orchid hybridizers with this species and this group because these are beautiful flowers. Only complaint I've ever heard from anybody growing this is that the plant gets pretty good size, but we have a lot of plants that are pretty good size. Look at the lip on this thing. It isn't just the color of the petals and sepals, but look at the delicate design on that lip. It's just amazing. If you were just to photograph that lip, you could put that on a shirt and everybody be amazed at how beautiful it was.
I can't believe she bloomed it.
You know, I've seen a number of people bloom this who I wouldn't have expected. I suspect that this may be a species that maybe has some variation in where it's found, and it's been maybe adapted by breeding. I don't know, but it's a beautiful thing when you see it.
That's beautiful.
She's in Tennessee, right?
Yep.
That's what I thought. Very, very nice. Great job. Next, here we have our dendrobium contribution. It's getting larger as the months go by and the years go by. Dendrobium annosum. This is a good example of what is in this group of dendrobiums and Dendrobium phyllum. Look how beautiful these are just as species. And what we're seeing now isn't just many orchidists growing these species and blooming them as well as it's possible, I think. But now we're seeing hybridizers getting involved in multiple generations, trying to improve the colors and the blooming and the ease of blooming, maybe is a good way to put it, in dendrobium in dendrobiums that are complex, but not coming from the normal approach. Little Sweetheart is just a really beautiful thing. And you can see this is a primary hybrid, and this is where the hybridizers are starting to really do their thing. Dendrobium ephyllum is a good example too of where these are coming from. This is coming from Southeast Asia and India, and many of the species of dendrobiums are coming from India, areas with some high altitude like the Himalayas. So we're getting to see not only a variety of species, but a variety of species from different conditions, and those are getting put into some interesting hybrids as time goes by. Next, and here's a good example. Dendrobium Gold Star Orange Royale. How many more flowers is it going to be possible to get on that? And just think about that. That's a beautiful thing. That's a complex, nobly dendrobium hybrid. And As I said, I don't know that you could do much better than that. It's grown extremely well. But look at the species on the right, Dendrobium moschatum. Here you can see some characteristics that if I was a hybridizer of dendrobiums, I'd be thinking, how do I get that into a complex hybrid like the one on the left? But it's beautiful all on its own. And I'm really happy to see so many um, of our members blooming these well. Next. Of course, we all know Dendrobium aggregatum, and this is also shown as Lindleyi. And the beauty of this is that you can get huge numbers of flowers and you can get masses of flowers where you can't even see the leaves. And the trick is having the time and the patience to do that because it takes a while to get all the bulbs that you need. The one facet of this that is somewhat, I won't say it's difficult in terms of growing, but all the books say that they need to be dried out for a certain length of time to get the best flowering. And perhaps one of the reasons that you need to do that is as the plant gets larger and larger, that mass gets thicker and thicker. And if you're not careful and it gets too wet when it's cool, you can rot the center of that plant and never get a big fully grown um, Dendrobium aggregatum where you can't even see the leaves. But you'll see some in shows at times. And you can see it below one that's smaller and looks like maybe that one's being grown on a mount, which is not a bad way to grow them, but it's a difficult thing to get them to show like if they're in a pot. On the right, Dendrobium lowara neoka, primary hybrid in the old-fashioned way, Canaliculatum by tennia and attinatum. And again, they're called antenna dendrobiums because they look like antelopes. So antelope dendrobiums with antennas. Didn't say that right. There you go. I used to have a couple of these that I loved. And you can find some hybrids that are small that don't get real tall, and they will get lots and lots of inflorescences. And the one facet I found about the antenatum types, they really do like to be pot bound. They do not like any space in that pot. If you can put your finger around the plant after you repot it, it's in too big a pot. They like to be root bound. Next, spathulatum. Probably one of the most widespread orchids in collections here in Florida, but also everywhere. And the reason we see more of them in Florida and more bigger ones in Florida is because we can grow them outside most of the year in a good bit of Florida, maybe all the year in some of Florida. They're really beautiful, lots of light green leaves, thin leaves, and they will be absolutely full of inflorescences if you just give them water, light, and a nice warm place to live. And away they go. The biggest problem with those, most people say, is the plants get too big. They grow too well, too fast. Isn't that terrible? An orchid that grows too well. But they're worth having, and you can keep these manageable. You can keep them in a 5 or 6 inch pot with a couple of nice big fans, and you'll always have a couple of beautiful inflorescences at the, I guess these are spring blooming as I recall.
Yeah,
Um,
March.
pretty kind of a long blooming period. Okay, what am I missing here? Oh, yeah, butterfly orchid, Mariposa. It's hard to believe there's much more that can be done with this small group of orchids that are in the Oncidium Alliance. They used to be in the Oncidium or be Oncidiums, but now they're separated. And we call these butterfly orchids, and you can kind of see why. This beautiful shape, unique in the way they both grow and the shape of the flower. But all the species that I've ever seen, and I'm not sure if I've seen all of them, but all the species I've seen have the same basic color pattern and look. Some have more yellow, some have more more deep brown. They all have this same shape. And what hybridizers have been doing is mixing and matching to try and get the largest flower with the brightest color, um, and the easiest to grow. And the ease of grow, I think, has been one of the harder things to obtain in this lineage. But they're beautiful. They should be in every collection, every general collection, I should say. And again, if there are those of you who don't know this particular group of orchid, you never cut the inflorescences off because they keep blooming year after year over and over again on the same inflorescence. Um, Most of the people I know who have these, there's always a flower open in their greenhouse because they're in bloom almost all year long. Next, here we have a group of orchids that I absolutely love for no particular reason. Um, these are primarily Caribbean, Bahamas, the Caribbean islands. And there was one particular hybridizer in Hawaii who just loved playing with what if I can cross these two species together. And he discovered some fascinating attributes about this particular group of orchids, the Tolumnias. They have varying numbers of chromosomes, multiples of one another. And it took him quite a few years and many, many crosses to figure out which ones went best together, to make the hybrids that we see in this particular set of photographs. The Rhodricidium, the Zula Odyssey, that is a combination of lots of species, including Europhyllum that we have here. I don't think Hackney is in that, but this is one cross that has a species from outside of the Caribbean. It's from a country right on the very northern tip of South America, the Rodriguesia. They will hybridize with the Tolumnia. All other attempts have pretty much failed, or if they have succeeded, you don't get viable you don't get offspring that can breed. So Tolumnia bahamensa, good idea there of how these grow. They're twig orchids. They grow in habitats that most Americans, if they were dropped in that habitat, wouldn't even bother to pick them, because it's such a ratty habitat. It's hot, sticky. Um, you wouldn't even recognize the plants half the time. They're all typically brown and yellow from the sun. You'll see them in full sun a lot of times. The Thlumnia calichyla is a really cute species, really distinctly different. We're getting feedback, Sue. Can you hear it?
Yeah, sometimes it comes and goes.
Okay. The calichyla, a beautiful yellow. There are hybrids with it. I think it's a cool thing to use to make hybrids, but you don't get the pretty colors that you see down in Tazula Odyssey. The Lumnia Hackney is one of the most fun Tolumnias there is. It looks like a bumblebee. And I can tell you from personal experience, if you have this in bloom and you leave it outside during the day here in the southeast, a bumblebee will try to pollinate it. The bumblebee doesn't get anything from it. It just thinks it's either a rival or a mate, potential mate. But they will just beat that flower to death if there's a lot of them. It's a fascinating combination of things. The Tolumnia europhylla, you'll see down in the bottom left, that is one of the species that actually makes some of the large petals. It's in the background that produces these large petals on complex hybrids. And Sylvestre, you see bottom right, again, you can see the plant and you can see the flower. An awful lot of the Tolumnias are beautiful in their own right. They're unique in the way they grow. And some of them will produce little plantlets on the end of long inflorescences, which allows them to grow from one shrub to the next in the wild. It's not a characteristic that we like in hybrids, but it helps it in the real world. But it's something for you to remember if you decide to start growing these. You have to pay attention to how they grow. Okay, what we got next? Paths. Path Angthong. This is a species that I used to know as Godefroy. Beautiful little white thing. It's a small path. I don't grow a lot of paths. The ones I do grow, I like the multifloras. Something about this one, I just couldn't toss it. Beautiful little leaves. It kind of just grows on its own. I don't do anything to it. I'm sure if I tried to grow it better, it would die. It just likes being neglected a little bit, but it's a cute little thing. And you can see why path flowers love it. And if you ever see paths in the real world at a show table, take a really close look of the petals and sepals, and you'll be surprised at the intricacies, little hairs, and so forth. Path philippinense variety compactum. This is a species worth talking about because you'll see that Philippinense is in the background a lot of complex hybrids, multifloras, and it makes some beautiful hybrids. There are two distinct different forms of this, and they at one time were even considered different species. We used to have a Path robelinii, which is the the Path philippinense with the long twisty petals, and then there was a Path philippinense variety philippinense that has little short um, petals. So there are two different forms. In fact, there are a couple more based on colors and so forth. And just be aware when you get these, if you want one with long petals like the Sandaranum, you basically need to look for that variety, but fairly easy to grow, light green leaves. They like more light than the paths with the speckled leaves. Um, and as I said, fairly easy to grow. They're easy. Also, some alba forms, which are really pretty and distinct. Next, I love semi-alba flowers, and Cattleya mossy is one of the species with some of the best. Um, there are a lot of semi-alba um, flowers out there. Mossy is one of the ones that one of the species that has some of the largest. It's not uncommon to find mossy flowers, including the semi-albas, that are in the 6.5, 7 inch range. And this particular one can. This came to me from Bill Rogerson, famous Cattleya grower um, up in Chicago. He sent me a small compot. Every single one of them, every single one had this beautiful shape, which is the classic mossy shape. Spring bloomers, you can see the cut flower trade in these all the time when you see them. The modern hybrids for the cut flower trade were largely based on Callia mossy. You'll notice they also have a characteristic, at least some of them, little flares on the tip of the petals. And you'll see that in many of the semi-alba Callias. It's just a common characteristic. Every single member of that small compat that bloomed were so similar to this. I thought maybe they were all just what they call it, protocorum multiplies. So that just means they're all the same. But as they've bloomed out, there's slight differences, just a little bit. They're just that strong of a form. Next. You know we're going to have Brassivola flowers, Brassivola this and Brassivola that, because we have so many people not only who grow but hybridize. And Alan Black, who two of these flowers are, he's one of those guys. Acacia stars by Maxima, and it's kind of neat that the top two flowers both have Maxima, and you can see what Maxima looks like in the upper right. This is, I think this is a cerulean flower, but it's sometimes hard to tell in photographs. It's not labeled as cerulean, but look at the lip. Isn't that just a gorgeous thing? And also the characteristic of a maxima is that little yellow stripe that comes down. You can see it, a little bit of it in the Max mini stars. That's pretty color. Maximum lust in the bottom photo, again, that little piece of yellow coming down, that little streak. And Ludimaniana's got beautiful um, lavender form. You can see little tessellations, little striping in the petals. Just a beautiful hybrid. That's a beautiful hybrid. That's yours, Sue. Really nice.
That's actually Alan Black's hybrid.
I figured it was.
Yeah,
Everything I see with Maxima, I know he's had some thought put
yeah.
into it. Next. LC Hana's Dream. Nice flat flower, nice contrast. I'd not seen this one before. Magic Melody, I know well. It's a pretty thing. I know Fred Clark, I think, uses Magic Melody. But the flower's more open because there's Lely anceps in the background. And that's both a good thing, and it has some characteristics that some people don't like, and that the plants can get pretty large. This doesn't strike me as a large plant, but I'm looking at the buds behind it. So somebody is coming in bloom. If I don't know if it's this particular plant or another, but it's a beautiful combination. Nice lip, closed lip, which a lot of people like. Um, really beautiful. On the right is Elsie Puppy Love, Newberry Princess. I think this is the remake. Gene may be online, but um, Carter and Holmes remade this. Gene Crocker made this with tetraploids of anceps, and the flowers were bigger than the original, which were made out on the West Coast, and many of them had this beautiful flat shape, better petals and sepals, which isn't unusual when you add ploidy to um, a cross. It's got a light blush too. It's hard to describe it unless you see it in person. Then you can understand what that looks like. But I love that blush color on Cattleyas. Next, RLC Joe Volpe, Pink Masterpiece. And if I was going to take someone who didn't know anything about orchids and describe sort of the ideal large labiate type Cattleya, it would be something like this. Beautiful petals. Notice how the petals overlap, kind of cover each other up. They cover the petals up. Um, and in the judging standard, the ideal is to apply a circle around the flower. And the more close the flower is to the circle, the better it is from a judging standpoint. And if you kind of imagine that, you can see this is pretty darn close. This one has a closed lip, just means that the lip is closed over um, the sex organs, um, which apparently it's supposed to be in the minds of some people. Um, and the lip is pretty flat. Ideally, maybe you'd be a little flatter, but when you have a lip this large, that doesn't often happen. But what's fascinating is to look at what's in the background. This is a semi-alba Cattleya crossed with a white. So how does it come out pink? I'm sure somebody is asking that. Well, white Cattleyas typically are missing a gene um, that came from both parents. And when you match it with another parent that still has that gene, even if it's hiding, um, suddenly you get pink or you get lavender. And this is a beautiful example of what happens when you do that. Really nice. And that's coming from Gene Crocker himself. Next. Here we have a lot of classic lavenders. And it's hard to say what a classic lavender is because I think a lot of people envision a classic lavender as being a really light lavender. That sort of went away with hybridizers working with a newer material from Central and South America. So Sarah Palin is sort of a good example of that. Thyme Finney is derived from some of the cut flowers from the 50s and 60s. Got that nice lavender with a darker lip that was so popular in cut flowers for various holidays in the spring. Volcano Spring, Volcano Queen. Those of you who know Cattleyas know that Volcano Queen is the clonal name from Akasuka orchids in the Big Island and Hawaii. And here again, we see a member of the cut flower period, Susan Holgan, as one of the parents, um, added to some larger flowered standard Cattleyas and a beautiful round flower. And typically these are not as large as we can get flowers. And that was preferred in the cut flower trade. These will be 5 to 6 inches or even smaller. And that's what they're after. Bottom left is a real classic, Drumbeat Heritage. Bonanza is a hybrid that showed up in the early 50s It was bred with everything. It was such a improvement over the standard colored Cattleyas. I can't even count how many awards were given to Bonanza. Sadly, it's almost impossible to find, at least to find one that's not virus. But it's in the background of an awful lot of standard Cattleyas today. Cornelia labiata by Pumila. This is this underappreciated orchid. Pumila's a little miniature, but I've seen a couple of these hybrids that came out of Carter Homes. I'm not sure if they're the ones that named it. I think it was named before. Made with really superior labiata and pumila. They're the cutest little standard Cattleyas that I can imagine. And I loved them because they were perfect Cattleyas, nice round flowers, that beautiful little tubular lip. Just showed everything you want, but they didn't take much space. Somebody who has a small space could grow these. And the Pumila also has a characteristic of adding more tolerance to low light in terms of hybrids. So I recommend these if you can find them. Should suggest somebody make this again because it disappears every now and then. It comes out, somebody has it, and then you can't find it anymore. Next. Paxton Brooks, Golden Dreams. This is one of Carter and Holmes' Gene Crocker's crosses that I think he made. He worked through multiple generations. This is a beautiful yellow slash gold, nice lip, three flowers. It's not a true miniature, but it is a small growing plant. And one of the first that I had of this type that bloomed and flowered well. One of its parents is Final Touch, which in my mind for many years was one of the best Cattleyas I had in my collection. And Miami Gold is another one that's just a beautiful thing. I've still got two or three of this particular cross, and I think that ones that I have kept were on the orange and peach side because this particular cross produced all sorts of variations in color that, as you can imagine, between yellow and light lavender. Just and look at the form. Nice flat flowers, just everything you'd want in a small statured, relatively small flowered plant. Next. Well, you're going to see some reds tonight in the plants that were the photos that were submitted. And I still have a hard time just getting used to having reds submitted because they used to be such rare things and existed only in the miniatures, the small statured things coming from Sophronitis coccinea, now Cattleya coccinea. But now we have a lot of reds, and we're going to see a bunch of them tonight, including some of the classics. The Newberry Delight Mendenhall. This is sort of a perfect combination. Edisto, which is an offspring of Oconee and one of the nicest offspring to breed with. Many of them are yellow, orange, red. The red ones and the orange ones are the ones that are generally used. And Beaufort is a beautiful little yellow or orange thing. And this is a perfect combination, Newberry Delight. Um, if I had my way, I'd probably use Edisto in almost all my crosses because I just love what it does. But you can only have so many red and orange orchids in your collection. Um, but I'm pretty sure this is Gene's cross, and you can see why he loves it, why he sent it in. The Valizac is a real interesting thing to have. This is Valizac Fire Magic, Golden Gate by Anzac. Notice that Anzac was registered in 1921. Um, Anzac Orchidhurst, when I first got into the orchid business, Anzac Orchidhurst, any crossed with it, that flask sold for anywhere between $50 and $100. And that was when $50 was a week's wages for a lot of people because it was red. It's interesting that red, a fairly large flowered red, showed up so early in the history of hybridizing even before we had the option of producing thousands of seedlings. But by the time 50s and 60s came along, we could produce thousands of seedlings, and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of flasks were sold with anything anybody could cross with Anzac. I think that probably there were more seedlings made with Anzac than anything else being done outside of the cut flower trade. And for all of those thousands and thousands of seedlings, very, very, very few produced true reds that would breed. Valisac was one of those true reds that did breed. Um, you don't see it in the background of most reds today because there are so many better ways now to get reds. But this was one of the few. And on the right is Jewel Box, one of the other reds that was produced using Anzac. Here we have Rantiaca crossed with it, and I think a Rantiaca crossed with anything will make something colorful, and Anzac definitely proved that. There are jewel box clones that are orange, and the red ones are the ones that are best known, and the ones that were cloned. So anything that was cloned back in those days was snapped up. Anything with Anzac in the background that actually produced reds was cloned and again spread far and wide. Unfortunately, that was during the time when viruses were sort of not really paid attention to, and most are lost. But these two are still around. Next. This isn't red, um, but a good example of a couple of things to talk about. This is Skinneri on the upper left, variety albescens. Skinneri is a beautiful spring blooming species from Central America, and this is a really good one. Look how wide the petals are, the sepals, nice color. Why is it albescens, not alba? Well, I imagine whoever put the name on there looked down the throat. It's legal. Look down the throat, and what you'll see is not only the sex organs, but you'll see some color. And if there's a little color in there or color anywhere on the petals and sepals, it's not a true alba. And so those we call albescens. What's fascinating about a lot of the Skinneri albas is if you grow them in really bright sun, they'll be a light lavender, light lavender. So those two things probably are what would bring someone to call it an albescens. And if you've got that little lens of color in the deep in the throat, it'll almost certainly produce some light lavender colors grown in the right conditions. Now, bottom is Skinneri alba snow. You can't see any color. Assuming that whoever named this looked down the throat and saw no color. But the fact is that for a long time, any white flower Skinneri that was collected was called an alba because they were a lot more valuable. They're beautiful. They deserve to be right on your bench, right next to standard Skinneri color, because they make wonderful specimen plants, grow really fast, and you get a good sense of how many flowers they can produce, and you get a good idea what it looks like when you're growing them well in both of these photos. Next. We're going to see a number of intermedia clones. I guess this month and probably next month too. May is the May for intermedia to flower. It's a Brazilian species. Oh, did I do that?
No, I think Terry did that.
Well, did I go backwards?
Yeah, he went backwards.
So intermedia on the left, that's intermedia concolor. That's a division I got from Francisco Miranda, who brought it with him when he moved his collection to the United States. And I wanted to show it because an awful lot of hybridizers don't understand the characteristics of intermedia that come from an aberrant, a mutant form of it. This is the standard intermedia. This is what it should look like in form. This is a really good one. Nice, clean color, nice lip. This is a concolor one. It's a little color there. Unfortunately, you can't really see the color in the petals and sepals, but it is there. This was from, as I said, his personal collection. Now on the right, we have a cross with intermedia. But the intermedia used in the cross on the right was not that standard form of intermedia. It was a form of intermedia called intermedia kinnii. And in this case, it was in a kinnii cerulean, which is the indigo or cerulean color. What that does, and it's really important, is see that lip on that big round lip. And And the big petals, those are because you're using the intermediate acini. The acini not only produces the color pattern of the lip, but the lip form too. So this is Christina Mendoza. Beautiful thing. The Floralia azul is a perfect combination with intermedia Cerulean acini, a really nicely grown plant. You'll see if you look at the flowers, look at the flower to the left and that, notice how the petals are still a little cupped because that's the way it's always going to be with intermedia acini as a parent. Next. I told you we are going to see some more intermediates. Um, Not sure the date where we started to see this other form that we call orlata show up in the intermedia. You can see the petals, the sepals are pretty much the same, but notice the lip. The lip is much broader and rounder than the standard that we saw the previous slide. And the orlata refers to the way the color bends around on the lip. The lip is folded over, and you can see how that color goes all the way around. And these are really several really good varieties of that particular form. Orlata crown fox and Orlata Rio on the bottom. These are some of the best of the Orlata form of intermedia that I've ever seen. Upper right is a really interesting one. And Sue, this is yours because I have one too. We got them at the same time. Um, this is Intermedia Vinicolor Achinii. Now, what's interesting about this is the Achinii form, and you can see how the petals are wider, um, and they're more shaped more like the lip in terms of color. But the color on this, both on the lip and on those splashes, is a real distinct red color rather than the more purplish. I think this is one of the most unique color forms that I have in my collection. And unfortunately, I must have 25 intermediates. Don't ask me why.
Oh my God.
There's so many different varieties, so many patterns that are just fun to have. Well, the other thing is I can't kill them. They grow so fast, so well that if you've got an intermediate, pretty soon you have two intermediates and three. You have to be careful. They will take over your collection. But these are all beautiful examples of Cattleya intermedia, and it is one of the species from Brazil, very much like Purpurata, for which there are almost an untold number of varieties based on color and shape and so forth. It's worth having. You could have a whole collection just of Cattleya intermedia. Unfortunately, they all bloom in the spring, a couple of months, but you'd have a good time when they bloom. Next. Sea breeze. This is an interesting primary hybrid. It's not labeled as sea breeze cerulean, but I believe this is a cerulean.
Oh yeah.
It's got that cerulean, a little bit of the cerulean lip. Warner Eye is one of those large flowered cattleyas that has a lot of cerulean color forms. And this is a perfect example of a hybrid combining two species with good cerulean color forms to make a nice flower. I've got a feeling this is a named variety just because it is so good. And you'll see sea breeze in a number of hybrids. That's Sheila Nathanson. Beautiful. Next. Manuel Zauber, Ludemania by Violacea. If you get the Orchids magazine, you'll see that there was a article about hybrids with Violacea, new ones and old ones. And one of the things that is, I won't say unique, but characteristic of Violacea hybrids is that colorful lip. It almost always passes it on. And sometimes that's too dominant. But here in this one, Ludemania by Violacea, you sort of get the best of both. Violacea is an open flower. You can see on the right, that's a Violacea. So the Ludemania has added a lot of form and shape to the petals. And that's pretty much a standard vision of what you get with a Violacea hybrid. A lot of people don't like this type of hybrid, but those that do know that one of the characteristics of them is that they grow really well. They're good growers. On the right is a Violacea variety striata. And next month, I'm going to show you some examples of Violacea color forms. Um, this one, the striations on the petals and sepals, um, don't happen every year. Some years there are more and some are less. It's an interesting characteristic of this species, which frustrates hybridizers. Next. Wow, Cattleya Bottom rosemary.
I wonder where that came from.
Yeah, that actually is the plant that well, we saw when we visited John Stanton when he still had his nursery about 50 feet away. And Rose said, "What is that?" Just walking in the door. It was so striking, the whole Grex was. We ended up getting 5 or 6 plants. And that was the one that Rose picked out and may very well be the best one that I saw in the whole Grex. Just looking at it, you can see why. A really flat lip, and a nice brownish color that's distinct. I'm not sure brown is the right word. Lots of spots. And then that white that covers up the column. It makes it a standout. And as I recall, when we first saw it, it had 8 or 10 flowers, and it will get a lot of flowers. Um, I don't know if you had it with more flowers, Sue, but it will get a lot more flowers.
Oh, yeah,
Um,
yeah. That's
yeah.
actually sort of an early season bloom.
Yeah, I actually found a clone I thought I'd lost, which was the Hacknote clone, just yesterday, repotting.
Oh,
I didn't know what happened to it, but I found it. It's alive and well. Bottom left, Suncoast Garnet Crowns. Here we have the hollow bulbed Mimicrophila, um, crossed with Mrs. Mailer. Again, the same parent as Cattleya subautumn. And you can kind of see why Mrs. Mailer has been such a powerful and useful parrot. It produces nice flat flowers in general, and anything that can flatten out Tibucinus has got to be a pretty darn dominant parent. Um, it can, unfortunately, produce large plants, and I'm guessing this is probably pretty good size, Sue.
oh, it is.
Does it reach to the top of your roof?
No, but it's a youngish plant, so
Give it time.
yeah, yeah.
Bottom right is Cattleya leopoldii. This is now called Cattleya tigrina. And this is an interesting form, interesting mutant, I guess I should say. Trilobello. And if you look carefully at the petals, you can see that they are trying to be lips. This is sort of the same concept of the Kinei form of intermedia. And here you have it taking on more of the strong form, as the Leopoldii is a bifoliate. And high flower count, I've seen some hybrids being made with this. Not sure what they're going to get out of it, but we'll see. But interesting form. So we'll see a
Yeah,
lot of Leopoldii here in a couple months.
yeah.
Next, who could not love Honky Tonk Woman? Um, Ricara. Um, this is Laelia undulata. For those of you who aren't aware of this, the the Laelia undulata group, they're from South America, typically high elevation, um, and we used to call these a Schomburgkia, same as the Miracophila. They were all in one group, but it turns out they're more closely related to the Cattleyas and the Laelias, and so they're a separate group. Crossed with Bouton d'Or, which is a fantastic yellow spring blooming thing. And you can see what you're getting. You're getting pretty good sized flowers, lots of color. And I got a feeling that that's just a super plant just to see it in the real world. Very nice. That's Tommy Matthews. Upper right, Newberry Lava Burst, Red Robin. Here again, we have Laelia undulata. This is a pretty good sized growing plant too, I should mention. And it's a Garanthe cross by a Cattleya, which makes Rojo, The Cattleya or the Garanthe is Aurantiaca. So you can see what we've got here. And the Cattleya is a miniature Rupicollis, what we used to call a Rupicollis laelia. So I suspect the idea was to get this to shrink down the undulata plant and inflorescence. And I've seen quite a few of these. They succeeded. This is Newberry lava burst. Newberry is always associated with the Cardin Holmes hybrid. Red Robin. Beautiful thing. And this is Gene Crocker's cross, and I think he grows inside or under lights. Um, so it's interesting that that can grow like that because there's a lot of flowers there. Memoria Rubens saluta. Memoria?
That's for his dad.
I was thinking that because I'm pretty sure he's still kicking
Oh,
somewhere
he's
down
still
there in
kicking.
South
He's down in
America.
paradise.
This is Elizabeth Palmer by Tibacinus. Again, we saw another Tibacinus um, hybrid in the previous slide. Good color on this. I don't know Elizabeth Palmer, but it's got Aurantiaca in the background. You can see it in those flowers. Something tells me Denise Palmer might live in South Florida. I don't know. Anyway, it's a beautifully grown thing. Next,
Next.
Tom Miranda, Bicornatum birosia. Um, we always get these unusual and interesting hybrids made with bicornutum. It's an interesting species that an awful lot of hybridizers play with every now and then. And I'm never sure why, because we sort of know what it's going to do. It does great things, but it doesn't do everything that some people think it's going to do. And it makes very striking growth patterns too. The lip is unique. It comes through in the hybrids. And look how many flowers you get on this stem. And that's probably coming from the Laelia. Again, another one of those species that used to be a Schimbergia that's been moved into the Rosia with long inflorescences. I still have several of them that I keep, even though in the wintertime the inflorescences end up getting burned up in uh, the glazing of my roof because I forget. But they're beautiful to have, and they can actually live outside even through the coolest weather because they come from habitats where they typically get down in the 40s. The right is Keith Uhlenhut, um, Memoria Louise Fuchs by Sarah Palin. We saw Sarah Palin a little earlier. Essentially, it was in that cut flower group or derived from cut flowers, nice lavender. Um, and the Memoria Louis Fuchs, that is one of the crosses made with uh, the Murmurcophila. But almost all of the frills and the petals or sepals are gone from this. That's yours, Sue.
Yeah, that's a Jim Roberts cross.
Yeah, he's still playing with these, and it's
Yeah.
interesting because he's made some interesting hybrids. I've got some. I got to tease the inflorescence out now before they get tangled up in everything else.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Next, we should be seeing a lot of encyclias, encyclia species, encyclia hybrids, encyclia borancana, Aleda by bractescens. Aleda is a pretty stout growing thing. Bractescens is a sort of a cousin that's a little smaller. I love bractescens just because it's cute, neat, smaller flowers, smaller growing, and I love because of the color of those individual flowers. A nice hybrid. I'm betting that's taking up a lot of space, so
Yeah, it's got about 8 trillion flowers on it.
that's one great thing about living in Florida. You can have things that have 8 trillion flowers. Uh, on the right is Newberry millefleur, profusa by incumbens. Uh, profusa is one of those species that I'd never had any respect for until I started seeing it used to make hybrids. And the reason I have changed my opinion is the flowers might not be phenomenal on an individual basis, but the plant itself can produce enormous numbers of flowers on strongly branched inflorescence, and the inflorescence don't get super long. They're sort of a perfect combination when you combine it with other species of Encyclia that have more color, colored lips and so forth. And I think I actually have this plant in my greenhouse. I almost lost it, but it's coming back and maybe I'll see a bloom this year. But it's a beautiful thing, and that's a beautiful hybrid. Next. Here we have our typical cochleata crosses. Upper left is black comet, indigo blue. And again, for those who haven't been listening to haven't been bored by my talks every month, clamshell orchid is what we used to call this. It's still called that by a lot of people, and you see that species all over the place. Um, and typically it has a small number of flowers. The indigo blue is particularly nice because of the color. And look at the flower count on this. Large numbers of flowers that sort of shocked me when I saw this. Ellen Fay is growing this better than anybody else has, and or that particular clone lends itself to a lot of flowers. The cochleata is a widespread species, and in some parts of the range, it only has a couple of flowers on a stem, while in other parts of the range, it has a lot of flowers on the stem. And so we might be seeing just one plant that's not as big as the other, or we might be seeing some different parentage. I've got a feeling that somewhere down the road, they're going to subdivide this species into subspecies at least. Bottom, Epicattleya Renee Marquet Tyler AMAOS. Pseudepidendrum is a very unique epidendrum, just beautiful green flowers with that yellow lip that has been tried over and over again uh, to be put into standard cattleyas to get some kind of a combination like this to come out. Unsuccessfully, I should say. Here you have a good example of one that actually has uh, produced nice flowers. This one has been awarded, and many of the hybrids that have been successful have not been breedable. They have not produced seeds. So I know there are hybridizers still out there trying, and I wish them well. It's just been one that has not gone the way we would think, probably because there's just some mismatched chromosomes. And once you get to the next generation, they just don't go. Next. Dick Pippin's Suncoast. Here we have Encyclia Lorraine Smith crossed with Little Mermaid. And this one has got Encyclia, Racevola, Garanthe, and Cattleya in it. Interesting combination. Nice inflorescence, beautiful color, and sort of a distinctive lip. I know there are people out there who always try to see how many different genera they could get in a hybrid. Um, and this one is nice because you actually get some beautiful flowers that would be nice no matter how many different genera were there. On the right, Charlie Brown. Here we have Rojo. We saw this before, cross with Cordillera. And Cordillera is a really beautiful Encyclia. And there are two different forms of Cordillera. This one, I'm not sure which one, they don't classify, but you can see that the Rojo dominated in terms of the color and even the lip. You can see the Aurantiaca form, shape, mm, color pattern coming through in the lip. And I have the feeling this one can get a lot of flowers. Doesn't quite have them yet, but Eric, you just have to grow it out a little longer. Next.
Whoop.
Jackie Bright, Gold Digger by Randy I. I don't see many Encyclia hybrids that I like that are yellow. I find most of them end up being muddied and so forth, but not this one. Randy I is a beautiful Encyclia and makes good hybrids, and you can see in this case the Gold Digger is lending that color to it. Everything is just almost perfect in this hybrid. I'd like to know how many flowers this can get, Sue. Is this a huge plant?
No, it's about a medium sized for an encyclia. It gets about 6 or 7 flower spikes on it.
Yeah, that looks gorgeous. That's what you want in an encyclia. If you're trying to get a bright flower, you sure have it there. Jackie Bright, that's a bright flower. On the right is Pixie Charm, um, Aleda cross with Pixie. Cute, cute, cute. So this is got Garanthe in it, and Encyclia and Callia. Here we have again a nice yellow flower. It looks like this inflorescence is just hanging down, whether that's just a characteristic of this particular bloom cycle or whether that's a characteristic of the hybrid. I don't know. I suspect it's not. Again, here I think we're going to see a lot more flowers on that in the future. Next, Digbyana Mrs. Chase. That has been around a long time. I've had my piece of this for over 40 years. I've never seen a spot of color come on the petals and sepals or the lip. This is one of the varieties of Digbyana that has been important in breeding green Cattleyas. A lot of people bred Digbyana with the idea of making green hybrids, but if you didn't use an albiform, you weren't going to get green. You were going to get lavenders. And Mrs. Chase has been around for a long, long time. Plato Matthews told me, the late Plato Matthews told me that this was the thing to use to make greens. But it's also just a beautiful Digbyana, and you can see it here. Sheila's done a great job. 3 flowers. I wouldn't be surprised looking at the number of bulbs there. There aren't some more buds coming somewhere there. Nicely grown. If you grow this and you haven't been able to flower it well, they really do take highlight. Grow this with your Vandas, and you'll see the leaf colors change when you do that. Orchidom Green Glade is a nice example of a green. One of the few out there where you have a nice green flower that's fairly large, and can't say this is a standard Cattleya shape because of some of the things in the background. But this has in the background Mariae, which we used to call Encyclia, and it has Digbyana both as a parent and grandparent. So it has a lot of good stuff in the background. Now, I've used this to make a hybrid. I can't tell you yet what it looks like yet, but I'm expecting greens. The Mariae is an interesting species because when you bring it into the hybrid, it tends to be dominated by genes that produce green flowers, and it doesn't matter what you're crossing it with. So I'm excited to see how this hybrid will come out. But you can see this is a nice one. This is from I guess this was registered by the Orchids.
I don't know
Can't,
who registered that.
it was the one of the members of the original consortium that started the orchid company that's down in the Caribbean.
It's Carib is
No, it's Nancy. I can't think of her last. Um,
oh,
Lost her name, but this is there were I think three different people that started it, and one of them bred Tolumnias, one of them bred
ah,
Encyclias, and this was, I think, from them. But it's a beautifully grown, beautifully grown. Next, more Brassivola hybrids. Been Lucky, Morning Edition. That is one of the most perfect Brassivola crosses. It's not a straight Brassivola, I guess, is a grandparent, but you can see the shape, but you also can see a nice flower. It looks like there's 4 flowers on that stem. That's a really nice combination of parents. That's Allen's. The Tropical Outbreak, Nodosa by Tropical Sunset. So here, Nodosa is one of the parents. And when you do that, you can see the spots in the lip. This has a unique characteristic. Look at those little Look at the markings on the petals. It's almost got either a yellow streak down the center of the petals or purple streaks down the outside of the petals. Pretty cool looking. And one of the fascinating things about combining some of these species is you can turn up aspects in the genetics that we don't see in most hybrids. Glorious May, Jean May by Morning Glory. Morning Glory is Purpurata by Brassivola nodosa. Look at the spots in the petals and sepals. That's just really cool. And a nice lip. What more do you want in that?
Hmm.
On the bottom right, Sunny Delight, Perenniae by Aurantiaca. Perenniae is another Brassivola, has more flowers. It's a little different, but the same basic form. Nice star-shaped flower, and the Aurantiaca is doing its thing, bringing that yellow color out. I'm a little surprised there aren't any spots in the lip, but I don't know that Perenniae is as good as doing that as Nodosa. A great group of Brassivola hybrids. Next. Uh-oh, that's it.
That's it. So
Brassivola.
next month we'll be talking about brassavolas.
Well, good. That was a good place to end because Brassivola it's been around a long time. People have been making hybrids with it just since I can remember, and they always are cute and seem to have a lasting quality.
I think there are real brassavola nuts.
There definitely are, but then again, they belong in the orchid group, so what do you say?
Thank you, Courtney. You were wonderful, as you always are.
Oh, this was fun. There's some good stuff here to talk about, and next month we'll have more good stuff, so tune in.
Tune in. Thank you, everybody.
Take care. Good
We
night.
appreciate it. Good
Good night,
night.
Courtney.